Hi, I'm Josh Gomez.
And I'm Jessie Frazelle, and we're from Kitty Cat.
We are currently in Burbank, California, visiting Terraform Industries.
And they're in a castle. Terraform is focused on CO2 elimination.
They are currently on the quest to save the world.
Hi, I'm Jessie. Nice to meet you.
Jessie, nice to meet you.
Josh.
Nice to meet you. Please come to my castle.
Cool.
Casey, first off, this is an incredible place. It is massive, and I can't stop looking at everything. But the first question I have is, why the castle?
We were looking for buildings that had plenty of room and outdoor testing space we could keep members of the public out of and lots of power, and it turned out the castle was the best one available.
Okay, so we have like a lot of theories about this. Like, was it a medieval times or like a prop shop, or what's like the original use case of it being a castle?
Yeah, so the building was built in 1987 by our landlord's father. He and his 11 kids, they just loved castles, and they built a bunch of buildings around here, and if you've got cinder blocks, you can make whatever you want.
So what made you come to found Terraform?
Yeah, I've been obsessed with both energy and space exploration for a long, long time. I wrote a book chapter a couple of years ago about a synthetic hydrocarbon supply chain on the surface of Mars, and then realized that that technology could be applied on Earth, where it could just possibly outcompete fracking this decade with solar getting cheaper and cheaper. And realized that's a transformational step that humanity needs to step beyond the hydrocarbons that we can get out of the ground.
Most of our viewers are most likely aware of climate change, but from my friend-to-friend perspective, what is your take on climate change, and how do we fix it, and why is it so important that we fix it now?
Yeah, that's the key question that motivates everyone here every day. And I think for a long time, people in my generation, and even my parents' generation, have been desperate to find a solution. But as soon as you read anything about this, you understand that hydrocarbons are something we can't really do without. We depend on them every day for just getting food and water, and without them, most of the world's population would starve pretty quickly. But at the same time, using them kind of bakes in this horrible future for our descendants. And so we kind of have to trade off these two needs. What we've managed to find here at Terraform is a way of transforming really incredible advances in terms of our ability to make solar panels, and then plumb that energy into our existing chemical energy systems, including hydrocarbons, so that we can have hydrocarbons without having a net transport of carbon from the crust into the atmosphere, which is what is driving climate change.
For our viewers that may not be more aware of this stuff, can you describe what you mean by hydrocarbon? What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, thanks for that. I sometimes forget that hydrocarbons is not in everyday parlance. Hydrocarbons are chemicals that form the basis of the fuels that we use, so gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel, natural gas, is all hydrocarbons. And the distinctive characteristic is they're made of hydrogen and carbon, hence the name hydrocarbon.
So you mentioned a couple of times now the cost of solar going down, and I'm curious kind of like your outlook on that in the future and like its effects on everything else.
How much time have you got? Solar power is an interesting one because it's been around for 50 years. But roughly speaking, it is getting 30 to 40% cheaper every time production doubles, and production is doubling every 2 to 3 years. And so what that works out to is 10 to 15% cheaper every year since 1970. Now, of course, it started off eye-wateringly expensive, even too expensive for NASA. But thanks to kind of strategic investments along the way, we're at the point now where roughly in 2010, I immigrated to the United States. In 2012, solar was cheaper than coal for the first time. And since then, it's basically become cheaper than any other form of electricity generation. It has numerous challenges in that production still has to continue to ramp up, and also solar power is only typically available during the day, and humans often need energy in the early morning and late evenings and stuff like that. But it's super exciting that we kind of have this get out of jail free card coming our way in the form of extremely cheap solar power. All we have to do is just kind of pave reasonably discrete swaths of the earth with solar panels.
So this is slightly off topic, but one of the reasons I really am interested in solar and stuff like that is because it would be cool to be like off grid or like completely unreliant on the grid. And I guess since you also know a bunch about chemistry and stuff like that through what you're doing, do you have any like fun ways that you would go about that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I sometimes speculate, what it would take to be able to enjoy the same quality of life I do with, a relatively discrete set of spaces, even potentially just me in a camper van or something like that. I think in practice it's extremely difficult because it's really hard to have a supply chain of like metals and chemicals and plastics and stuff if you're just by yourself. But if you're curious on this, there's another YouTuber called Cody Don Reader, who has a channel called Cody's Lab, where he actually tries to do a lot of this stuff by himself at his ranch in Nevada. So it's really legit. But as far as energy goes, yeah, it's possible to put solar panels on your roof, have a battery in the garage, have an electric car. You can basically electrify your home. But there's all kinds of major industrial sources of demand for, in particular, hydrocarbons, oil and gas, that are really hard to electrify. So just take one example, aviation, particularly like long distance aviation, flying over oceans and so on. It's really hard to beat kerosene as a fuel for that, or maybe other fuels like liquefied natural gas, something like that. So, so in practice, if we want to carry on doing aviation or even do aviation faster and better and more people having access to it, we need to find some way of doing synthetic aviation or sustainable aviation fuel, ideally with a process like ours.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I will check out that YouTube channel because I spend a lot of time on TikTok watching the off-gridders.
That's an interesting confession to make.
When you started Terraform, was there anything that you were not expecting, like an obstacle that you were not expecting that kind of hit you really hard and that may have made it harder for you than you thought?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs find that stuff is much more difficult than they expected when they set out. But I think through a combination of luck, paranoia, and just everyone's desperation to see something like this work, we've actually been probably had as many set forwards as setbacks, and so on average, I'd say we're on target, which is super encouraging. What we're trying to do here is fundamentally not impossible. It's not even all that hard. It's nowhere near as hard as launching a rocket into space or something like that. The really hard part for us is making it make money and then making hundreds of millions of them over time. And so we're constantly thinking forward to the time when we'll need to have this building, churning out one machine every hour instead of one machine every 6 months, and how we design it to make that work properly. All right, so before I introduce you to Lucie, I just wanted to show off my cool model here, which we put our 3D printers to work for a while. And this is a 1 to 200 scale model. Everything here is 1 to 200 scale. This is roughly a 5-acre solar array. It's about 500 feet on a side. And if you've ever flown in a plane and looked out the window and seen large solar arrays in the Mojave Desert or wherever, then you'll see these things just repeated, stacked, like tiled, one next to the other over and over and over again. And then in the middle, you'll see this little kind of white box, typically about the size of a shipping container, that contains an inverter, which converts the direct current solar power into alternating current, which can go out onto the grid. All right, but the problem we're facing today is that the grid is congested, and we just are unable to move enough energy from these solar arrays into the grid and then to end users, and then the solar power is available at the wrong times of day. It's kind of a disaster. So what we do is we have our system we build here, which integrates, it replaces that inverter, and it converts the DC power, the direct current power of the solar array, directly into chemical energy in the form of natural gas, which can then go to consumers via parallel distribution infrastructure. Right, it can go through pipelines, through trucks, and it can be stored naturally for days or weeks or even months at a time, and it can get that power out there, which is super useful. If you're a solar developer, you want ways to move this power to market. If you're a consumer, you want cheaper and more available fuel, and the fuel's carbon neutral. What's not to love? So we have these 3 different parts here. We have a hydrogen electrolyzer, which consumes most of the power. We have a direct air capture system that captures CO2 from the air. That's where the carbon and the hydrocarbon comes from. The hydrogen comes from the electrolyzer, obviously, and then we have a reactor which combines the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen to make methane. This is the same process that SpaceX is planning to use on Mars to make fuel, and then makes methane and then a little bit of steam water left over. And then, to the same scale, just for fun, we have the Castle, we have the Millennium Falcon, we have the James Webb Space Telescope, the DC-3, which was the mainstay of cargo transport in the Second World War, possibly the finest aircraft ever built, and of course the actual Falcon, the Millennium Falcon, to the same scale. So this thing goes to space almost every few days. We've got some trucks down here, and this is my house, suburban 3-bedroom to the same scale. So like, roughly speaking, one of these systems we think we can produce it for maybe the same price as a high-end car, and which is the right cost in order to compete with fracking, and then we can make these by the millions. Right, and this unit here, eventually, we'll need about 400 million of these worldwide over the next 20 years, and that's enough to completely displace all drilling everywhere on Earth. Wow. Right, and also produce enough more fuel that everyone, like the poorest person on Earth, can have as much fuel as the average American today, which is, I think, enough that we can basically solve poverty. Right, and we can't do that without finding new sources of energy. Right, there just isn't enough oil and gas to go around. But if we get the oil and gas out of the sky, right, from solar power and air and water, then we can achieve that, which I think it's a super cool mission, even if it didn't incidentally solve the climate problem as well. But we'll take it. Hi, this is Dr. Nurdin, our chemical engineer.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Josh.
Lucie.
Hi, I'm Jessie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay, I got to take off, so I'll leave you to it.
All right, Lucie, there's a lot on here that I don't understand. Can you walk us through what's going on here?
Yes, for sure. So I will start with like the basic equation of the fact that about 95% of the hydrogen that is produced in the world currently is produced through this reaction, which is called the steam reforming reaction. And the way it works is we take natural gas, which is methane, that's this molecule, with a lot of water, and this is how, using high temperature and high pressure, we make our hydrogen. And as you can see, one of the other byproducts that is generated in this equation is carbon dioxide, or CO2. So this reaction consumes a lot of carbon resource, a lot of water, to produce the hydrogen that we are currently using for a bunch of different applications, and also releases a lot of CO2. Well, at Terraform, we believe in the opposite reaction. We believe that at some point, we will be able to make hydrogen so cheaply that this reaction will become viable, which is that we are going to take the carbon dioxide from the direct air capture system that you've seen before, which is how we capture CO2 from the atmosphere, the hydrogen that is generated from our water electrolysis, and we are going to create natural gas as well as water. So why is this important? It's important because we are breaking the linearity that we are currently having with carbon. Right now, we extract carbon from the ground, we burn it, we release it into the atmosphere. This reaction actually enables us to take carbon dioxide from the air and then transforming it into a fuel, which is natural gas, so that we can actually take a waste product and transforming it into something useful. We stop drilling, we stop extracting chemicals from the ground, and we just use all the excess carbon that we currently have in the atmosphere that is responsible for our climate change. So this is what we are trying to do. This reaction is not simple, though. If you take these two molecules together, nothing will happen. So what you need to have a system where you can have those two molecules collide together to make the molecules that you want. And this is the reactor that you see behind you. This is called a Sabatier reactor, invented by Mr. Sabatier in the 20th century. And what it does is, over a careless surface, it enables carbon dioxide and hydrogen to be in contact at high temperature and pressure to make methane and water. So this is what I built here. This is what you see. And here are the different performances that we can have with the reactor. So under standard conditions, which is when for one molecule of CO2, which is you see here, and 4 molecules of hydrogen, you can get 91% methane production with a bit of leftover of carbon dioxide and hydrogen. Now, you can play around with how much hydrogen you have in the reaction. You can increase that number because we can control that pretty easily. And therefore, under what I call hydrogen-rich environment, where we have a tiny bit more hydrogen than 4, you can see that we can decrease our carbon dioxide content and increase our hydrogen content. And that will become relevant because we want to sell this natural gas. And a lot of companies are looking at having hydrogen in addition of natural gas. So this reactor allows us to kind of control what kind of blend we want to have at the end. So what we are really interested in is making very good quality natural gas. So we have some specific requirements. We want to have less than 1% hydrogen in our output for now. And we want to have less than 3% of carbon dioxide as well. In other words, we want to have very pure methane production. It also needs to be dry. The reason is because you want to burn it. So you don't want to burn a wet gas. So basically, we want to make sure that the water content is very low. So finally, how does that reactor work at Terraform Industries? So far, you've seen our DAC system, which is direct air capture. This is how we can capture our carbon dioxide. You've seen how we can generate hydrogen through our alkaline water electrolyzer. Those two gases are combined together, put into our reactor that you see behind you. We purify the stream to reach this quality, and then we just have pure methane, and then that gets into the consumer. So for the purification, it's pretty simple. We only have 3 things to think about: hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and water. This is done pretty it's pretty straightforward to do. And I think the thing that is the most important is that you don't have to worry about any other impurities, There is no sulfur, there is no oxygen, there is no hydrocarbons or liquid or dust or toxic chemicals because we're not extracting it from the ground. We're just taking CO2 from the air. And so this is in a nutshell how we do the methanation reactor at Terraform. And why we think this is a very good solution to provide energy to anywhere in the world. You don't need to depend on places where you can extract carbon from the ground because carbon dioxide is everywhere. So as long as you can put some of our machines anywhere where we have access to renewable energy, then you can have on-demand natural gas. You have all the infrastructures, at least in the United States, to have access to natural gas. And so we believe that if we can plug this in, then we can definitely cut down the drilling and having a decentralized energy system.
That was amazing. So I have a question about the machine and how you all test it.
Sure, let's go take a look.
How do you go about testing it, or how did you know that like this like assembly would work for like what you were trying to build?
So this is a good question. This is a prototype. So we are still iterating on our design in a sense that we are trying different configurations. We're trying to make this reaction that looks so simple actually happen. And so the way it goes right now is first you need to control your gases. And if you remember my 1-to-4 ratio, you need to measure that accurately so that you can control the ratio between carbon dioxide and hydrogen. So the first task is the gases. The second part is, well, you need to create a reactor body so that your reaction can take place. And this is done using this device. This is basically a heat exchanger or shotgun condenser. Inside, you can see you have tubes. This is where your catalyst is located. This catalyst enables carbon dioxide and hydrogen to go into contact on that surface and react together. So this is what you see in the aluminum foil. Those are those shotgun condensers. We have two of them because 80% of the reaction takes place in the first one, and then we need a second stage so that 20% of whatever is not reacted can react together. So basically, we go around and test it. We have different temperatures, we have different pressures, we have different flow rates of the gases that go into contact with the catalyst. And all of this, is controlled with electronics. This is our temperature control, this is our pressure control. You can see we have tanks of gases over there. Those are basically our gases that are going to be put inside the reactor. And the rest is basically pipes, logistics. I didn't tell you, but this reaction happens at high temperature, so you need to find a way to heat this body part. This is why inside the aluminum foil, there's actually heating elements around this, and this is why you control the temperature. Something that I haven't told you as well is that the reaction is called an exothermic reaction. What it means that it generates heat as it goes. So you need to find a way to remove the heat that is generated by the reaction on its own. And this is why you have this outlet here. So a condenser allows you to remove some of the heat. Right now we're using mineral oil, so just oil, to suck up the heat that is generated from this reaction. And so this is why underneath the table there is a different set of tools. There is a big bucket here with like some pumps. This is to flow the pump in and out of the shotgun condenser to remove the heat generated by this reaction. And the last thing, if you remember, that reaction creates water, right? Those are the two products, methane and water. So we want to collect that water because why not? It's going to be very pure water, and it can be reused for our alkaline water electrolyzer. So we have to condense the water. The way you do that, because water, right now we are operating at 300 degrees Celsius, so we generate steam. So we want to cool down the mixture so that water can condense below 100 degrees Celsius and we collect the water. So this is what those tubes here are. Those are just coils where the gas and the water passes through. It gets cooled down, and then we have devices that collect the water. They are called mist filter, and we remove the water as it is collected. The reason is because one, we collect the water, but two, the reaction actually is driven forward by removing the water.
Oh.
So it has double effect of increasing our conversion of carbon dioxide to methane, as well as collecting the water that is produced from that reaction.
I was just going to ask you what you do with the water, because the primary thing that you want is that methane.
That's right.
But I noticed that in the reaction, that water comes out of it too. So it makes sense that you already planned for what you want to do with that water.
Yeah.
So I have another question too, sorry. So it gets like crazy hot. Like when you test, are you allowed to like stand in here or near it, or how do you do safety mechanisms for if anything goes wrong?
Yeah, so this is why you see we have the plexiglass here so that there is nothing that can come in contact with the operator. We have signage that it's hot, that there is hydrogen in the area. Before I started doing the reaction, I leak test the entire system, meaning that there is no leak possible, both from gases and liquids. So the entire cooling system is completely secure, as well as the entire reactor bed is completely leak-proof, so no gas can leak out. I do have a few emergency procedures in place if something goes wrong. Let's say the temperature goes too high or the pressure gets out of control. I have an emergency button here that shuts down everything. So all this electrical can be controlled with the red button. This is where I control the pressure. So by only moving this manifold here, I can quickly depressurize the entire system.
So you gave us a great explanation of the overall of Terraform, but what is life in your shoes day to day? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I am responsible for the design and the implementation of the methanation reactor, but actually my background is in chemistry. And all our different subsystems, either the direct air capture, the water electrolysis, or the methanation reactor involve chemistry. And so to do that, we need a chemistry lab to do some of our testing and prototypes. And if you want, I can walk you through them.
Let's see it.
So we always want to make sure we have close-up clothes, lab coat, hair tie, eye protection. And if you are going to use any material, you would wear gloves. But in our case, we're just going to go and have a look. The first one is our TGA instrument. That actually allows us to see how good we are doing at capturing CO2. So you might have remembered that one of our direct air capture uses a solvent, a solid solvent, and it goes from one phase to another. And the way we analyze it is using this instrument. It burns off the different components, and it tells us like how much CO2 was contained within that material. So it's very crucial to see how we are doing for our direct air capture prototypes.
Yeah, I've been dying to know what this machine in the corner does all day.
Yeah, so this is a fume hood, and the way it works is you can safely handle any toxic or hazardous material inside it. So here we have a clean surface. This is the first rule of having a fume hood. You want to have everything cleared up and ready to handle. And you can manipulate any hazardous material in here. In our case, we're using a different solution, for example, for our alkaline water electrolyzer. Alkaline means that our pH is basic. We have a basic solution. So it's that chart actually. When the pH is above 7, which is neutral pH, you can actually see the different colors of the different pHs. And part of our procedure is to neutralize that solution that we're using for the water alkaline electrolyzer. And so we would do some of this in here to manipulate these hazardous materials safely. And the reason it protects you is, one, you have a shield that can protect you from anything that is splashing or any powder that is coming towards you. And second of all, it works as a hood as you would have in your kitchen, meaning that all the fumes or exhaust come in and out of this device. So you can safely manipulate any chemicals in here.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you actually have acid in there.
Yes, we do actually, because if you remember, I told you we are handling basic solutions. In order to neutralize something that is basic, you need something acidic.
I can't help but constantly look at shiny things. So can you explain what that is over there?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is actually the first generation of the methanation reactor we built. And as you can see, it uses very similar things that I've shown you over there. This controls the gas flow. This is our reactor bed where the reaction occurs. But the striking difference is this is small, while the other one is big. So part of what we are trying to do at Terraform is to build prototypes and change the design so that we can make better machines, but also bigger machines. So this was our first design to understand how that reaction happens. Remember, we have to generate heat, we have to remove heat, we have to remove water, and we have to control the gas flow. So this was a small prototype to just let us understand how that reaction takes place. And we built our next generation based on the data that we collected from the first generation of the methanation reactor. So that's what this is for.
Super cool.
I have a question. What are the purpose of the cotton balls?
Yes, so it's actually not cotton wool, it's called glass wool.
Oh.
It is a very good insulator. So glass wool allows you to put it around somewhere where you are generating heat to avoid this heat to escape via radiation. So this is what the cotton wool is used for. Okay, so this is one of our subsystems, and it's a very important one because this is how we capture carbon dioxide. So this is what we call our DAC system, which stands for direct air capture. And in that case, we are capturing carbon dioxide. This is done through what we call a calcium looping cycle. So this is the cycle, and I will walk you through all of these fun steps. We start with calcium hydroxide. That's this molecule here. It looks like that. It looks like those nice flakes of calcium hydroxide. Those flakes are going to go through a carbonation steps, which is where calcium hydroxide is transformed into calcium carbonate. These steps is how we capture CO2. So if you take calcium hydroxide and you pass it through air, it will preferentially trap carbon dioxide to make calcium carbonate. Now, you want to release the carbon dioxide that is trapped in that molecule. This is done through what we call a calcination steps. You take calcium carbonate and you put it literally in an oven at very high temperature. We're talking 900 degrees Celsius. And this releases the carbon dioxide and it makes calcium oxide. It is this very fine powder here. Yeah. So this is calcium oxide. It is the result of the calcination of calcium carbonate. The problem with this is that it is not calcium hydroxide. So you need to go through what we call a hydration step, where you take water, you react it with calcium oxide, and you make calcium hydroxide. This is actually the machine that is just behind you. This is the machine that will take calcium oxide, pass it through with water, and make calcium hydroxide in those very nice pellets. And this is how we have completed the circle.
That's so cool.
Of the calcium looping.
I was actually going to ask when we were standing over there, like how you get the CO2 from the air, but then I was like, that's a dumb question. But now I feel better about myself, honestly.
And so you can see here, this is the picture of what's called a kiln, an electric kiln. This is the machine that takes calcium carbonate, makes calcium oxide to release carbon dioxide. It used to be this machine here that is slightly deconstructed. We built it, we tested it, and now we want to make some modifications to the design. So this is why it looks like that, but we are rebuilding it so that it looks like that again. And as of last Wednesday, this was able to give us 94% carbon dioxide through this process.
That's so cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Right now you see, this is our carbon dioxide content. So there's a lot of carbon dioxide in the air. I am going to turn on this machine. It is going to make a lot of noise, and it will take about a minute for it to drop down, and you'll see the CO2 content decreasing.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm going to turn it on. It will make a lot of noise. We won't be able to talk to each other. I'll pause it, and we'll look at that graph.
Awesome.
Okay? All right. It's the captured CO2.
That's cool.
And now
It's like really going.
you can see the two values in and out.
Oh, okay, dope.
Okay? So this is going in, this is going out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So let me walk you through the two different graphs that we're seeing. The one in red here shows you the CO2 content that comes in. As you can see, we are between 400 to 500 ppm of carbon dioxide. So just to explain what we saw here, we saw in the outlet we had about 400 to 500 ppm of carbon dioxide, and then on the outlet you can see that we are between 100 and 150 ppm of carbon dioxide. So we have a very big drop of CO2 as we pass air through the sorbent bed. So there is literally a big gradient of concentration between the outlet that is high carbon dioxide rich to the outlet which is carbon dioxide poor. So there is one more thing that I want to share with you. I've told you that now that we have captured carbon dioxide, we have make calcium carbonate and we need to release the CO2. And I told you that this is done with an electric kiln that is just behind me. It is currently in reconstruction, but we have a 3D printed model of it. So this is how it looks like. This is the stand in black. And then if I don't break it, we can open the kiln and I can show you what's inside. The green layer are insulations to make sure that we keep the heat of the reaction. Those are literally slots, like a toaster. And in between the toaster slots, this is where we put our material, in that case calcium carbonate. And we have material that flows in, it gets in contact with those slots that are at 900 degrees Celsius, they get calcinated, and we recover the material on the outlet. So here, it's open, we collect the material, and boom, we capture carbon dioxide. So far, I've shown you our direct air capture system, the way we capture CO2. The second part of this is how we make hydrogen. We make hydrogen through an alkaline water electrolyzer. So we take water in an alkaline media. Alkaline means basic. In our case, we use potassium hydroxide. And we put that into an electrolyzer. So we are taking water, we're passing current, and by passing current, we have two reactions happening. One creates oxygen, one creates hydrogen. We're literally splitting water in half. So those are the principles of atmospheric alkaline electrolyzer, where we have water that is transformed into hydrogen and oxygen. And the way we design it, one of our core values at Terraform is to make something that is very cheap, not necessarily efficient, but that will allow us to make very cheap hydrogen so that we can compete with the way hydrogen is currently produced. So we do that using very simple materials. This is a small version of our very big water electrolyzer that we will build one day, and it's just made of plastic and bolts. In here, we have what we call electrodes. This is just made of nickel sheet. At the electrodes, we have two electrodes, cathode and an anode. This is where the two reactions will happen, oxygen evolution or hydrogen evolution, which is where water gets split into its two elements. So we have a variety of electrodes, and then in between we have a membrane. That membrane allows gases to pass either one way or another, and to also make sure that we have the conduction of the current within this cell. So this is a small version. When we open it, it looks like this. So we have the different slots for the different electrodes and the membrane in the middle. This is a small version of those nickel electrodes that I cannot remove. There we go. So this is the nickel electrodes, and this is the membrane. Very cheap materials. We can 3D print all of this. This is a small version of it. We have bolts. We put it back together. And then if I can direct you towards this screen here, this is our prototype water electrolyzer. So you can see it's a way bigger cell than this one. It's just a bigger version of it. Those are our two exhausts. One is for hydrogen, one is for oxygen. And then we have an electric system that allows us to supply the current to drive the reaction forward. So this is the basic of alkaline water electrolyzer. It is a very complicated system, but in a nutshell, we take water, we pass current, we split it in half, we collect the hydrogen while the oxygen is just vented. So now that I've shown you the pictures of our rig, I can show you where we go and build it with our hardware shop.
Awesome.
Let's see it.
So this is exactly what I was just showing you on the picture. This is, Kyle is currently building this electrolyzer stack. As you can see, it's made of this plastic. You can just touch it if you want. You can have a look. And this is our membrane in between. It's nice, like a rubber material. And then this is a closed loop of the electrode, so you can see the nickel metal sheet in between, and all the bolts that are going to hold it in place. But overall, this is our hardware station. You can see in the background, we have all the tools. There is a lot of us working here, so we want to make sure that everything is organized and people can actually visualize our tools. So if you come here,
Yeah, the organization is beautiful, honestly.
we have some of our bins with some of the screws and little fittings, personal protections. We have our drills and powered, all the different machineries, the different adapters, all the wrenches, tape, hammer, snips, everything that we need to build hardware.
All right, I'm back. Well, what did you think?
It was amazing.
This whole thing was incredible. And thank you so much for having us come join you guys. And thank you for explaining everything in here to us. I just have one more question, which is how can those that are watching right now, how can they get in contact with you, or how can they follow what you're doing? It's an awesome mission statement, and we want to make sure that they can follow you on your guys' mission.
It's a great question. We're quite active on Twitter. Our handle is @Terraform Indies. They wouldn't let us have the full length. And we have a blog, blog.terraformindustries.com, and a mailing list, which is mailinglist@terraformindustries.com.
One thing we like to do with everyone before we leave is a rapid fire round where we each ask you 3 questions. And are you all ready?
Yes, I'm a bit scared.
Let's do it. What is your #1 comfort food?
Corn chips.
Olives.
What is your favorite tool brand?
Black & Decker, I guess.
I don't have any. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Totally okay.
We're in front of Milwaukee here. I mean, Milwaukee.
That's totally fine. If you could own one exotic pet, what would it be?
Probably Budgerigar.
A snake.
Your favorite color of filament for the 3D printer?
Silver.
Orange.
One moment in time where you had a ton of adrenaline that you're very proud of.
Skydiving.
Getting stuck under full storm, 5,000 feet up on the wall, rock climbing.
Whoa.
Jesus.
Favorite element on the periodic table?
That's easy.
Probably tungsten.
Cobalt.
Nice.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
has been great. What's up with the hot dog machine? It's genius.